Salvete discipuli. This video is the second video, and actually the final lesson in Chapter 5 for Latin for the New Millennium, Volume 2. And in it, we're going to learn another subjunctive subordinate clause called the indirect command. So before we talk about indirect command, let's remind ourselves how we can kind of directly command people to do something. In Latin, you can use the imperative mood, right? Like ama, love, like love your neighbor, or stand as in like stand up, okay? You can also more gently give a command by using the jussive or the hortatory subjunctive. So, for example, amamus, let us do something, let us love our neighbor. Okay, it's like a gentler command. Amet, may he or let him love his neighbor. The indirect command is like other indirect constructions, like the indirect statement or the indirect question, in that it sets up a command but in an indirect way, right? We need something to set up the command, okay? Indirect commands are sometimes called jussive noun clauses. They are set up, they are introduced by the conjunctions ut or nay, obviously ut for a positive command, nay for a negative command. And again, they're an indirect construction. So he ordered him to do something. Okay, so we're finding out what the command was indirectly, not as a direct command to another person, but we're learning through the sentence what was the command. Okay. For the most part, indirect command translates as to do something or not to do something. So, he orders the troops to attack the city, or he commands the troops, nay, not to attack the city. So, more or less, an indirect command, the actual subjunctive subordinate clause can sometimes sound like an infinitive. It's not an infinitive construction, but in English, it sounds best to our ears to translate it as an infinitive. And we'll work on that in class and determining the best way to translate an indirect command, okay? In addition to the rest of this video. There are certain verbs that will anticipate an indirect command. I'm going to give you some of them now. Some of these you know, some of them you don't, but I want you to have them in your list so that as you learn these verbs, and you will, when you go back and study the indirect command, you have these words as potential verbs that will anticipate an indirect command. Hortor, I encourage. Impero, I command. Manio, I warn. Oro, I ask or I beg. Persuadio, I persuade. Peto, I seek, or again, I beg sometimes. Quairo, I seek. Rogo, I ask. I know that you can sometimes maybe look at rogo since it means I ask and think, oh, that's setting up an indirect question, but sometimes you can ask someone to do something for you, and that's an indirect command, okay? Also remember, you shouldn't confuse the indirect command and the indirect question because indirect command is set up by ut or nay, whereas the indirect question will have a question word that sets up the subjunctive subordinate clause, okay? The following verbs sometimes introduce indirect commands. Sometimes they actually set up an infinitive. And nolo, at least you know that it means I am not willing or I am unwilling because you know the imperative form of it, noli nolite, which sets up a negative command. But it's one of three irregular verbs, wolo, nolo, and malo, that will sometimes set up indirect commands, sometimes not. Wolo means I want or I wish. Nolo meaning I don't want or I don't wish, or malo I prefer. Okay. The verb eubeo, which means I order, almost never sets up an indirect command. It's an idiomatic construction where, for some reason, eubeo will take an infinitive, a complementary infinitive, as opposed to an indirect command. And that's weird, right? Because impero basically means to order. It means to command someone to do something. But that's going to set up an indirect command. You command someone to do something, whereas eubeo is going to take an infinitive, a complementary infinitive. Eubeo, I order someone to do something within the infinitive. Okay. All right. I have a series of example sentences here, so I'd like for you guys to follow along. Obviously, I don't have the English written down, so you have to actually listen write down the English translation as we go. Now, again, when you have a subjunctive subordinate clause, identify where that subjunctive subordinate clause begins, identify where it ends, translate your main verb first, our main clause first. Here it's vos rogo. I ask y'all, I ask you in the plural, ut studiatus, that you study the Latina linguae. Studio takes the dative, so linguae Latinae is dative, that you study the English language well. Okay, so I ask y'all to study the English language well. There you go. So you could translate this, I ask y'all that y'all study the English language well, or I ask you to study the English language well. Again, there's no infinitive in here. We have an indirect command with ut plus the here present subjunctive, but we can translate it like an infinitive in English for it to sound as good as possible, okay? Eis imperavi, ne urbem pro salute sua relinquerent, blah, 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 blah. Again, our indirect command starts with ne, ends with relinquerent, our subjunctive verb, in this case, imperfect subjunctive. And our main sentence then is imperavi eis. Imperavi is another one of these words that takes a dative. I commanded them, eis, ne, that they not leave the city or abandon the city on behalf of their own health or their own safety. It sounds a little awkward. So again, you can translate ne reliquerent as not to abandon. I commanded them not to abandon the city for their own safety. Another word that's going to set up indirect command, monamus. Again, ut to audiant is our indirect command, our subjunctive subordinate clause. We warn the students, ut audiant, to hear the verba, the words of the wise mother. Here we have our ut daret, so we have to translate puellae tyrannem ora verunt. The girls begged the tyrant to give mercy, clementiam, to the wretched father. Persuadeatur, let him be persuaded. So here we actually have adjustive subjunctive, or maybe a volative. So he should be persuaded, or let him be persuaded, nay, not cadant, to fall in vitia, into vice. Okay. And then imperator miles ex agris discedere ubet. Okay, so now we have ubet giving a command, but remember, ubio does not take an indirect command. It usually takes an infinitive. So the general or the emperor orders the soldiers discedere ex agris, to go away from the field. And if this were not ubio, but say impero, that would change it, of course, to imperator militibus imperat ut ex agris descedat, or descedant. So there you go. Just changing that verb from ubio to impero changes this from a simple infinitive construction to an indirect command. Okay, I hope you took good notes. We will discuss this in class, and I hope you have a lovely evening. Walete.